Welcome back to the Rock Vault, and today we're setting the needle down on the unforgettable 1970s. This was the decade when FM radios glowed in the dark, denim jackets carried the smell of concerts, and rock wasn't just heard, it was lived. Join us as we relive the songs that turned youth into legend and memories into timeless echoes. From the very first notes, Hotel California wrapped listeners in a haze of mystery. The haunting guitar progression, the silky harmonies, and Don Henley's cryptic vocals painted a picture that was both alluring and unsettling. It wasn't just a song. It was an atmosphere, a slow descent down a desert highway where temptation and danger seemed to live side by side. When that dual guitar solo took flight, Joe Walsh and Don Felder etched their names into rock history with a sound that was unmistakable. Released in 1976, the track quickly became more than just another radio hit. It was a statement capturing the excess, allure, and hidden darkness of the 1970s. The Eagles, already masters of blending rock with country and folk, delivered something grander here. A 6.5-minute epic that was part cautionary tale, part anthem of a generation that lived for freedom, but often found itself trapped by its own indulgences. Chart-topping success was inevitable, but what cemented its place was how deeply it resonated across the culture. For so many who grew up in that decade, Hotel California wasn't just played, it was experienced. You'd hear it drifting from car stereos at twilight, the glow of dashboard lights cutting through the dark as the road stretched endlessly ahead. It was the track that closed out parties, the one that made you stop mid-conversation just to listen to that solo soar. Its mystique became a mirror for the decade itself. Glamorous, wild, and a little dangerous if you looked too closely. Even today, that solo carries the weight of memory. A sonic time machine back to long hair, open roads, and restless hearts. For the Eagles, it defined their career. But for the fans, it defined an era. The song remains one of the most requested on classic rock radio, proof that its spell hasn't faded. Hotel California endures because it isn't just about the 70s, it is the 70s. A story of beauty and excess, freedom and consequence, etched in 6 strings and forever tied to the soundtrack of our lives. Few riffs in rock history have carried the weight of legend quite like Smoke on the Water. With just 4 notes, Deep Purple unleashed a sound so primal, so unmistakably heavy, that it became the anthem of countless garage bands and stadium crowds alike. Ian Gillan's piercing vocals cut through the haze, while Ritchie Blackmore's guitar snarled with an edge that felt dangerous yet thrilling. It was raw power wrapped in simplicity, proof that sometimes the most unforgettable music comes from the boldest restraint. The story behind the song only adds to its myth. Written about the fire that tore through the Montreux Casino during a Frank Zappa concert, the lyrics turned real-life chaos into one of the most immortal tracks of the decade. Released in 1972 on Machine Head, the song skyrocketed Deep Purple into hard rock royalty, cementing their place alongside Led Zeppelin and Black Sabbath as pioneers of a heavier, more electrified sound. For fans, this was more than just another charting single. It was the soundtrack of rebellion. You could hear it blasting from high school gyms during basketball warm-ups, or echoing from open windows on summer nights, as teens huddled around cheap amplifiers, trying to master that legendary riff. It was the first song many aspiring guitarists ever learned, and for good reason. It carried with it the thrill of possibility, the idea that rock belonged to anyone willing to pick up a guitar and try. Even today, Smoke on the Water remains one of the most played rock songs of all time, its opening notes instantly transporting listeners back to the 1970s. It wasn't polished or overproduced. It was gritty, thunderous, and alive with the spirit of the era. For Deep Purple, it became their signature. But for fans, it became a rite of passage, a reminder of when rock was loud, unapologetic, and unshakably real. The brilliance of Smoke on the Water lies in its endurance. It captured the fire of a moment, both literally and musically, and transformed it into a universal anthem that still resonates across generations. And from that smoky haze of guitar and drums, we move to another song that redefined what rock could sound like. Few songs captured the ethereal beauty and haunting weight of the 1970s like Comfortably Numb. Released in 1979 on The Wall, the track stands as one of Pink Floyd's most transcendent moments. David Gilmour's guitar solos don't just sing, they weep, soar, and carve their way into the very soul of rock history. Roger Waters' lyrics, dark and poetic, speak of isolation, numbness, and the walls we build around ourselves. Together, their voices create a tension. Waters' clinical delivery against Gilmour's soaring cries that makes the song feel like both a confession and a release. Musically, it's a masterpiece of contrasts. The verses drift like a dream, soft and hypnotic, while the choruses explode into catharsis with those spine-chilling solos. Critics hailed it as one of the greatest guitar performances ever recorded, but fans didn't need critics to tell them. They felt it in their bones. Comfortably Numb was proof that rock could be more than rebellion or volume. It could be art, it could be transcendence. For listeners in the late 70s, this song became a mirror for the era's disillusionment. The flower power optimism of the 60s had faded, replaced by economic struggles, political turmoil, and a gnawing sense of alienation. Yet out of that heaviness came a song that offered escape, a 6-minute journey into another world. Many remember lying in their bedrooms, the glow of a stereo light cutting through the dark, letting Gilmour's solo carry them somewhere beyond the walls of everyday life. Decades later, Comfortably Numb remains one of the most requested live songs in rock. Gilmour's solos, often improvised on stage, became legendary moments that left stadiums breathless. It's not just a track, it's an emotional event, one that defined Pink Floyd's legacy and gave the 70s one of its most hauntingly beautiful anthems. And while this song explores isolation and inner walls, the next entry takes us back to the raw fire of rock's communal spirit, a sound that pulled people together instead of apart.
Now there you go again, you say you want to...
When Go Your Own Way hit the airwaves in 1977, it wasn't just a single. It was a raw nerve laid bare. Lindsey Buckingham's urgent vocals, pulsing with frustration and heartbreak, collided with one of the most driving guitar riffs of the decade. Fleetwood Mac, a band already known for its lush harmonies and intricate songwriting, delivered something sharper here. A song that cut to the bone. The rhythm section, anchored by Mick Fleetwood's relentless drumming, gave the track an almost marching intensity, while Buckingham's guitar solo flared with equal parts rage and brilliance. The track emerged from the emotional storm brewing within the band during the recording of Rumors. Relationships were unraveling, tensions were high, and somehow out of that turmoil came one of the greatest breakup anthems in rock history. Its raw honesty resonated with listeners who felt their own heartbreak mirrored in every shouted lyric and strummed chord. The song didn't just climb charts, it cemented itself as one of the defining statements of the late 70s. For fans, Go Your Own Way wasn't just about the band's internal drama, it was about their own lives. Couples who'd driven the highways of the decade with love in their eyes now found themselves playing this track on repeat as relationships crumbled. Teenagers blasting it from their bedroom stereos understood its defiance, its bittersweet mix of anger and freedom. It was more than a breakup song. It was an anthem of independence, of finding yourself even when the world felt like it was falling apart. Even decades later, that solo still sends sparks flying, carrying all the urgency of the moment it was recorded. Go Your Own Way has remained a staple of rock radio, a song that captures both the fragility and strength of the human spirit. Fleetwood Mac turned their pain into poetry, and the result was a track that still speaks to anyone who's had to walk away and start again. From the storm of heartache and defiance, we shift now to another sound that electrified the decade, a song that captured rebellion not in words, but in sheer power. If there was ever a song that defined pure, unfiltered rock and roll attitude at the close of the 70s, it was Highway to Hell. From the first snarling riff, Angus Young's guitar cut like a switchblade through the speakers, while Bon Scott's raspy vocals embodied the rebellious, devil-may-care spirit of the decade. The track was loud, unapologetic, and unforgettable. A rallying cry for every kid who wanted to break free from small-town rules and taste the wild rush of freedom. Released in 1979, the song was more than just a hit. It was a declaration. Co-produced by Robert John "Mutt" Lang, it gave AC/DC a sharper, more polished sound without losing their raw energy. The song propelled them into international superstardom, landing on charts worldwide and cementing them as one of the most ferocious rock bands of the era. Tragically, it also became Bon Scott's swan song, his voice forever immortalized in one of the greatest anthems ever recorded. For fans, Highway to Hell was more than just music. It was a lifestyle. You'd hear it blasting from jukeboxes in smoky bars, echoing from Camaros and Trans Ams cruising the strip, or shaking the walls of basement parties where teens gathered to defy curfews. It wasn't just rebellious, it felt dangerous, and that danger was exactly what made it thrilling. Every shouted chorus carried the feeling of throwing caution to the wind, of grabbing life by the throat and never letting go. Decades later, Highway to Hell still blazes with the same fire it did in 1979. It remains one of the most iconic hard rock tracks ever, played in arenas, on classic rock radio, and in the headphones of every new generation discovering what rebellion sounds like. For AC/DC, it was the song that opened the gates to legend. For fans, it was the anthem of freedom at full volume. And from the reckless thrill of that highway, we move into another classic that captured the soul of 70s rock. Not with fire and fury, but with timeless storytelling. American Woman came storming out of the gates in 1970 with a swagger that was impossible to ignore. From Randy Bachman's distorted guitar riff, raw, dirty, and unforgettable, to Burton Cummings' fiery vocal delivery, the song carried a gritty edge that perfectly captured the turbulence of its time. It was bluesy hard rock, pulsing with an urgency that announced the decade of the 70s with a bang. The track was born out of a jam session, almost by accident, but it quickly took on a life of its own. When released, it shot to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100, making the Guess Who the first Canadian band to ever top the US charts. Its lyrics sparked controversy, often debated as both a political statement and a simple rock anthem. But either way, it struck a chord. This was no polished pop hit. It was loud, brash, and unapologetic, the kind of song that demanded attention from the first note. For fans, American Woman was more than just a single on the radio. It was a soundtrack to smoky bar rooms, buzzing college campuses, and Friday night parties where amplifiers rattled the walls. Teens would crank it up on their record players, letting that gritty riff echo through their bedrooms until their parents yelled to turn it down. It felt dangerous in the best way, carrying the thrill of rebellion that defined so much of youth culture at the dawn of the decade. Even today, American Woman remains one of the most recognizable songs of the early 70s, its riff instantly transporting listeners back to an era of muscle cars, denim jackets, and restless energy. It wasn't refined or delicate. It was gritty, raw, and alive with the spirit of rock and roll. The Guess Who may have gone on to release many more hits, but this was the song that branded them into rock history. And as American Woman shook the start of the decade, the next classic carried that same restless energy to new heights, pushing rock even further into uncharted territory.
All that glitters is gold, and she's buying the stereo.
When Stairway to Heaven first poured out of speakers in 1971, it felt like more than just a song. It was an experience. The gentle acoustic opening, Robert Plant's ethereal vocals, and Jimmy Page's delicate finger-picking invited listeners into a dreamlike world. Slowly, the track built layer upon layer, shifting from folk-inspired softness into soaring rock majesty. By the time Page's legendary guitar solo erupted, it felt as though the song had ascended into another dimension entirely. Released on Led Zeppelin IV, Stairway to Heaven never charted as a single, yet it became one of the most requested songs in rock radio history. It was whispered about, analyzed, and revered. A track that carried mystery, grandeur, and a sense of timeless wonder. Plant's lyrics, filled with allegory and mysticism, invited fans to interpret their own meanings, turning the song into a kind of shared spiritual journey. For fans in the early 70s, hearing Stairway to Heaven was unforgettable. It was the slow dance at high school proms, the late-night track played during drives on empty highways, and the moment at parties when conversations hushed so everyone could soak in the power of that solo. The way the song unfolded, from quiet intimacy to thunderous release, mirrored the emotions of a generation that sought both peace and passion in their music. Even now, more than 5 decades later, Stairway to Heaven continues to stand as a monument of classic rock. It represents everything that made Led Zeppelin untouchable: virtuosity, ambition, and the ability to turn a song into a journey. For many, it's not just the band's defining moment, but the defining song of the entire decade. Stairway wasn't simply played, it was experienced, and every listener carried their own story of where they were when they first heard it. That's why it remains etched in the collective memory of rock fans everywhere, a timeless ascent into musical immortality. Few songs captured the spirit of the American South and the essence of 70s rock, quite like Sweet Home Alabama. Released in 1974, this anthem fused country twang with hard rock muscle, carried by one of the most infectious guitar riffs ever laid to tape. Ronnie Van Zant's vocals, gritty and confident, gave the track a swagger that resonated far beyond its southern roots. With its sing-along chorus and triple guitar attack, the song became an instant classic, one that could bring a crowd to its feet from the very first chord. Written partly as a response to Neil Young's pointed critiques of the South, Sweet Home Alabama became more than a regional anthem. It became a cultural statement. Skynyrd didn't shy away from controversy, but they wrapped their pride in irresistible grooves and unforgettable hooks. The song soared up the charts, peaking at number 8 on the Billboard Hot 100, and cemented Lynyrd Skynyrd as one of the leading forces in Southern rock. For fans, Sweet Home Alabama was a soundtrack for wide-open highways, bonfire gatherings, and summer nights that seemed to last forever. You could hear it blasting from pickup trucks cruising back roads, or echoing across crowded college parties where everyone knew every word. The song's chorus had a way of pulling people together. No matter where you were from, you couldn't resist shouting along when that hook came around. It was more than a hit. It was a unifying force, a reminder of place and pride wrapped in rock and roll glory. Decades later, Sweet Home Alabama still holds its power. Whether played on classic rock radio, blasted at sporting events, or covered by new generations of musicians, it carries the same fire it did in '74. For Lynyrd Skynyrd, it became their signature song, a legacy track that defined not just the band, but an entire genre. From the southern swagger of Skynyrd, we shift to another sound of the '70s, a track that proved rock could soar beyond borders and capture universal emotion. When Boston released More Than a Feeling in 1976, it was like a spark had lit the fuse of arena rock. From the first shimmering acoustic chords to the explosive chorus, the song radiated a warmth that felt both intimate and massive. Tom Scholz's meticulous production, layered soaring guitars, rich harmonies, and that unforgettable, crystal-clear vocal from Brad Delp. It wasn't just a rock song, it was a carefully sculpted anthem built to echo through stadiums and stay lodged in the heart forever. The track captured the bittersweet ache of memory, of hearing a song that takes you back to a moment you thought you'd lost. Schultz, an MIT-trained engineer, recorded much of the album in his basement studio, painstakingly crafting a sound that would become Boston's signature. More Than a Feeling became the band's breakout hit, climbing the Billboard charts and turning Boston into overnight legends. It was polished, yet powerful, bridging the gap between progressive precision and pure rock emotion. For fans in the mid-70s, this song was the perfect companion for long drives with the windows rolled down, the wind tangling through their hair as the chorus lifted them skyward. It was the kind of track you blasted on vinyl at full volume, feeling the speakers shake as the solo hit, or sang at the top of your lungs during those summer nights that seemed to stretch on forever. It didn't just play. It resonated, stirring up the past and making it feel alive again. Decades later, More Than a Feeling still stands as one of the defining songs of classic rock radio. Its opening chords are instantly recognizable, sparking a wave of nostalgia that hits as hard today as it did in '76. For Boston, it was the beginning of a legendary journey. For fans, it was, and still is, a reminder that rock can capture not just a moment, but a feeling that lingers long after the last note fades. And from Boston's soaring anthem, we move to another '70s classic that proved rock could be both powerful and deeply personal.
Put a gun against his head, pulled my trigger, now he's dead.
In 1975, Queen shattered every rule of what a rock song could be with Bohemian Rhapsody. It began as a quiet ballad, blossomed into operatic theatrics, and roared into a thunderous hard rock explosion, all in the span of 6 minutes. Freddie Mercury's soaring vocals, Brian May's searing guitar, and the band's layered harmonies created something the world had never heard before. It wasn't just a song. It was a spectacle, pressed into vinyl. At the time, record executives doubted anyone would sit through such a strange, genre-defying piece, yet the world proved them wrong. Released on a night at the Opera, it climbed to #1 in the UK and became a global sensation. In America, FM radio embraced it, and listeners couldn't get enough of its daring shifts and unforgettable crescendos. Queen had taken a gamble, and it paid off by etching their name into rock history. For fans, Bohemian Rhapsody became more than just music. It was an event. You remember the first time you heard it? Maybe in a dimly lit bedroom with a turntable spinning, or blasting from a friend's car stereo as you tried to sing along to the operatic middle section. It was theatrical, fun, and deeply moving all at once. No matter how many times you played it, there was always that same thrill when Mercury belted, "So you think you can stone me and spit in my eye?" Decades later, it remains one of the most beloved rock songs of all time. Revived again in the '90s with Wayne's World and honored in films, stadiums, and karaoke bars, its magic has never faded. Bohemian Rhapsody wasn't just Queen's masterpiece. It was proof that rock could be both wildly experimental and universally adored. And as this operatic journey leaves us breathless, the stage is set for our outro, a reflection on how these songs defined a decade and still echo through our lives today. And there you have it, 10 of the greatest rock songs that defined the 1970s. From haunting ballads to roaring anthems, these tracks weren't just hits. They were the soundtrack to denim jackets, smoky arenas, and long nights with the radio turned up loud. They still echo with the same fire today, proving the music never truly fades. Which of these songs takes you back the most? Share your memories in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more trips down rock's golden highway. Until next time, keep the vinyl spinning.